This is my TransUnion and Equifax credit report back in 2003. These are my beautiful Equifax Beacon and TransUnion New Empirica scores back then. I couldn't get a Lucy on credit. These are my TransUnion and Equifax scores now. And here is my beloved FICO score 8 as of January 2022. My scores were in the 500s until 2011 when I tried to buy a minivan to take my kids on road trips. But I got my score to almost 800 in 3 months by following these steps. The first thing you want to do to boost your credit score by 200 points or more in 1 to 3 months is to request your free credit report at annualcreditreport.com. All 3 major credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, have all agreed to allow consumers in the United States, in this country, to request a free credit report every week at annualcreditreport.com until the end of 2022. Here's the website. You can find a link to it on our spreadsheet where I list links to information resources and application portals to grants for everyone. On the tab labeled credit, you will find not only the link to annualcreditreport.com, but to other resources that will teach you how to fix your credit in the event you don't want to pay for it. Remember, we're all about free education on this channel, which also constitutes a grant for everyone. Just like the free education tab, we've got a credit tab now, and we got all kinds of links here, again, to annualcreditreport.com. Why do you want your credit report in your possession so you are able to identify any derogatory items, any derogatory reports coming from creditors that are impairing your score? Perhaps inaccurate information. It's also impairing your score. So you know how to deal with it. First things first, you want to know what your credit score constitutes. So I've included a link on the credit tab to myfico.com, and right here it'll explain to you exactly what are the factors that the credit bureaus use to go ahead and calculate your credit score. Number 1, your payment history. 35% constitutes payment history. We'll go ahead and get into that in a minute, but this is probably the most important. Although it constitutes 30%, which is less than 35%, nonetheless 30%, this is the most heavily weighted factor that I have seen determines your credit score that you can automatically change or improve in order to boost up your credit score by 200 points or more within 1 to 3 months. The amounts owed, 30%. Now, the key thing for you to know about the amounts owed is your credit utilization ratio. That is the amount of debt that you have on a revolving credit line divided by the total credit available on a particular revolving credit line. In other words, on a credit card. So, for instance, you have a credit card with a $10,000 credit line and you've used up $5,000 on that particular credit line. You've run it up to $5,000. $5,000 divided by $10,000 gives you a 50% credit utilization ratio. Now, for you to have a credit score well into the 700 to 740, which is the sweet spot, most of you already know this, once you get a credit score of 740, then you will enjoy all the benefits of having an 800, 850 credit score. Now, for you to get to a 740, you have to ensure that the credit utilization ratio, the amount of debt that you keep on each revolving credit line, is 30% or less to get to around 740. Now, if you want 800, 850, 790 or whatever, you have to drop that credit utilization ratio into the single digits. A number of people, they keep it at 0. Now, that's good because you save on interest if you're not keeping that debt and you're not paying that back, especially if you're churning, if you're just getting credit cards in order to enjoy the benefits to get the 10,000 or 50,000, tens of thousands of miles so you could travel for free. That's what I do. That's why I keep about 20 credit cards. I don't even know. I've lost count. I'll drop a video if you want and tell you why I keep so many credit cards. So I'm able to fly for free various times in the year overseas. I'm always stacking up on miles and I get 5% cash back. You want to keep, sometimes some people, they keep 0%. Why? So they can enjoy as much cash back because they don't want to be paying all the cash back in the form of interest. Now, if we're just talking about improving your credit score nonetheless, you just want to get it to the 740. You want to enjoy the best interest rates when you apply for new credit and also get the highest credit lines when you apply for new credit. All you need to get it at is 740. And for that, you have to keep your credit utilization ratio on each account to less than 30%. And at 0%, you got to be careful. A number of people do it because, of course, they don't want to pay interest on it, but you have to use the account because a number of people have found that new creditors will not extend new credit if people go months and years keeping a credit card at 0% usage. So they're not using the credit card at all. As a matter of fact, I've actually lost a couple of credit accounts due to that. I had a PC Richard and Son, which is an electronics store out in New York City. They closed my account because I stopped using it. TD Ameritrade as well. I've got an account with them. I keep it open because the more credit lines that you have open, the more available credit that you have in the eyes of the credit bureau. So I've got a $7,000 credit line that I cannot use. Nonetheless, I keep it open. Don't close your credit accounts because once you close them, then you have less credit available and thus your credit utilization ratio actually goes up. All right. So one of the key ways for you, of course, if you could pay it off, if you could pay it down, you got the cash, go ahead and pay down your credit balances to a 30% credit utilization ratio. And that puts you in a great position. You can go ahead, apply for business credit, for business credit cards, and then you can go ahead and run those up. And most business credit lines, revolving credit lines, don't report to your personal credit report. So you can run those up beyond 30% credit utilization ratio while you keep the personal credit cards to a low. So you can run those up to go ahead and finance your business. So that's one of the benefits of you setting up a small business. In other words, selling something, which I told you time and time again. Join the club of over 32 million small business owners. Sell something which can be as easy as you selling used items on eBay or Mercari or Craigslist or wherever, so you can enjoy higher credit lines. And you have another way for you to keep your credit utilization ratio low and thus qualify for more credit offers and more forms of capital. The other thing you can do to lower your credit utilization ratio is by requesting a credit increase. Now, you have to ensure that the creditor does not perform a hard pull of your credit report, that they perform a soft pull of your credit report, if any. Some of them, they'll just take a look at your payment history. And that's why you also want to make your payments on time because, for instance, Capital One will not give you a credit increase if you've had a late payment within the past 12 months. So you've got to pay that bill on time for 12 months for you to qualify for a credit increase with that financial institution. Discover performs a soft credit pull to determine whether they'll give you a credit increase. But some organizations, such as my wife's Comenity Angel Victoria's Secret card, they perform a hard pull. So you don't want to have a hard pull because then you may drop your credit score, and then that also hurts you from potentially getting other lines of credit for businesses and other. You want to try to control your hard inquiries as much as possible. Another way for you to go ahead and keep those credit utilization ratios low on all accounts is to redistribute your debt across different accounts. So for instance, let's say you have 2 credit cards and each of them have a $10,000 available credit limit. One of them you ran up to $5,000, the other one you've got at 0. You can go ahead and perform a balance transfer of $2,000 from the one that owes $5,000 and go ahead and now you've got $2,000 or 20% credit utilization ratio on one of the cards, and you got a 30% credit utilization ratio on another card, and that'll help you boost up your credit. Another option is to seek personal loans so you can consolidate your debt. Some personal loan offerings will allow you to be approved with a lower credit score. So for instance, TD Ameritrade, they used to have an express personal loan for which you qualified for approval with a 675 credit score. I actually did that one time. I had my credit score right at 675, 676 or 680, I believe. I got that loan and went ahead and paid down my credit cards to a 30% credit utilization ratio so I could qualify for these business revolving credit lines that I told you about. And I could run those up without touching my credit utilization ratios on my personal account. So you can get loan consolidation by any means necessary. Go ahead and drop that credit utilization ratio down to 30%. Now, even if you got to sell things, let's say you got used items. Let's say you want to sell my man, or I'd like to sell, if I flip on my man right here and I decide to sell him on eBay and I find he's going for 30 bucks, all right? I made up, I don't even know how much I paid for this dude, by the way, but he's my dog, whatever. I would never sell him. Nonetheless, $30 plus the rest of the items, rest of the hundreds of items that I got in the house. I probably got tens of thousands of dollars worth of merchandise that I can go ahead and flip. And I can go ahead and take that extra money and pay down my credit utilization ratio. I got a Techniques 1210 classic turntable. And I've seen some of those go on eBay for up to $2,000 sometimes. The typical price is around $200-$300. I even got this leather FUBU that goes for like about $300 or $400. It's always selling on eBay. Got a bunch of CDs, bunch of old comic books. Once I make time, I'll go ahead. As a matter of fact, my kids, they regularly take stuff from that stash and they get some extra pocket money for themselves from there. So you can take that money and go ahead and pay down those balances. What constitutes 35% of your credit score? Your payment history. Now, a number of people suffer from this stuff. I have suffered from it from the past. That's why, as I showed you, I had a credit score into the 500s. Don't do this anymore. These basically, for instance, when you make a late payment on any of your credit cards, the creditor will report that to the credit bureaus. They'll report 30-day late payments, 90-day late payments, 120-day late payments. So one of the ways for you to remove that, first off, let me just tell you something, because I know a number of people, they don't know this. I've explained it to people and people are like, whatever. Some people, they miss the due date for their minimum payment. And they're like, all right, forget it, whatever. I missed the due date. They're going to report it to my credit anyway. And they just go ahead and just give up on the account, never pay for it again. That is an error. Even if you make a late payment of a couple of days after the due date, they're not going to report to the credit bureaus right away. The creditor will report to the credit bureaus only after 30 days of you being late making that minimum payment. So first thing to do is to be proactive. So if you miss it by a couple of days, go ahead and pay it anyway. And if you incur a late fee, go ahead and give them a call. Give the creditor a call, because if it's only happened to you once within 1 year, most creditors will waive that late fee. As a matter of fact, if you log on to your online portal of most of those creditors, they'll have a bot that'll respond to you. Just go ahead and type late fee and they'll be like, oh, you got a late fee. We'll see about waiving that for you. Let's see if you qualify. They do whatever they do. You get the 3 dots that light up one after the other, and then they're like, you have an opportunity to have your late fee waived. Would you like to do so? Click yes, of course, and they'll waive the late fee, and then you just make your payment, and everything goes on as it's supposed to. Keep current, but they only report the late payment until after 30 days of being late. So you got all that time. Now, when it comes down to keeping your credit utilization ratio low, let's say you want to drop your credit utilization ratio to the 20s or the 30s so you could apply for new credit. You want to do that before the creditor closes the most recent billing statement, because that's when they report to your credit bureau. And so once you do that, before that, then they report to the credit bureau with the new balance, and then you boost your credit score potentially in a month. Let's say you want to pay that down, you got to do it before that, not before the due date. You could do it before the due date if you want to, but for instance, you could pay the minimum payments, you could avoid a late fee, and then you pay the rest down. You're like, all right, so I pay the minimum due of $100 or whatever, and I'll pay the other $2,000. That'll get it down to under 30% by the 15th if the due date was on the 12th, if the statement closes. Now, you have to find out from the creditor themselves when is the statement closing date for each particular month. Just go ahead and give them a call. They have to give you that information. Now, one of the things that you could do to be proactive in terms of late payments, you could potentially get those removed. Now, one of the ways to do that, do not sign up for online statements, for paperless statements, because once you do that, then they stop sending you physical statements. Now, by law, according to the Fair Credit Billing Act that was enacted into law on October 28th, 1974, creditors have to send you a bill for the next due payment 21 days before it is due. So if you've got paperless statements, it's hard for you to say you never got the bill, because they can send it to your email, or you could just log into the online portal and you can see the statement nonetheless. If you receive physical statements, you can go ahead and call their customer service line, request a supervisor, and tell them, listen, I did not make the payment in time because I didn't get the bill. And by law, they have to send you the bill 21 days before the due date. So that could be a potential argument that a supervisor can go ahead and take into account and decide to stop reporting that 30-day late payment or 90-day or whatever payment to the credit bureaus. That's one way. Another thing is to set up automatic payments of your minimum payment. That's something actually that I have to do because I'm always missing these payments for some reason and I'm paying late fees. I have to be calling them and requesting them to waive my late fees. Nonetheless, I don't wait 30 days to pay them. I pay them perhaps, 2 or 3 days late at times. So I have to do that. Go ahead and set up automatic minimum payments to each of your creditors, especially the creditors that report to your personal credit report. I keep them all in a spreadsheet with the due dates, and I have to always update the due dates, especially on the business cards, because by law, I have read that personal credit cards can't change the due date. The due date has to be every month. However, with business credit cards, they're changing them all the time. So I got to always stay on top of the due dates. So I'm just going to set up automatic minimum payments from now on. Now, some people get tripped up because if they miss their minimum payment by the due date, then let's say their minimum payment was $100. If they also miss paying that minimum payment when the creditor decides to close the most recent billing statement, then the creditor will start to bill not only the $100 for this month, but the $100 for next month. So you see a bill now for $200. Like, what? How do I owe $200? I just missed the $100 payment. All you got to do is pay the $100. Okay, now this is not financial advice, simply what I do. I go ahead and verify this information with my creditor. All right, how much do I actually owe? So you won't report this to the credit bureaus. $100. Okay, you pay the $100, although you still owe the other $100. If you are down in your luck or whatever, and you still have the rest of the time to go ahead and make up that other $100, go ahead and make that payment. You may even want to consider not even disputing any late payment reports on your credit report, because if the late payment was reported over a year ago, it won't impact your credit anymore. Over 2 years definitely won't impact your credit. Nonetheless, if it's 2 or 3 months, you may want to deal with it. Sometimes you may not want to deal with it at all if the creditor decides to go ahead and shut down the account because you're performing that dispute, because that will remove that available credit from your credit report and thus increase your credit utilization ratio across all accounts, which can hurt your score. If you are unsuccessful in having your creditor remove that derogatory item, that derogatory report of that 30-day late payment or 90-day late payment, you can go ahead and dispute any derogatory items, including late payments. The way you do that is, first off, the credit bureaus, they try to make it simple, quote, simple for you to dispute any derogatory item or inaccurate item on your credit report through an online dispute system. You don't want to use that online dispute system. Why? Because when you do that, your online dispute, I don't even think anyone even looks at it. It goes through their system. The system uses whatever cursory form of evidence or documentation to go ahead and verify the validity of that account and typically just rejects the dispute. No, you want to go ahead and send in potentially a handwritten letter. I would never handwrite it myself. Perhaps you could type one out, print it out. Why? Because by you going ahead and sending that dispute with a physical letter, you've introduced a human element into the entire dispute process. Why do you want to do that? Because you want to have a human go ahead and take his or her time to go ahead and read it and then potentially erroneously enter the account information, and they can't validate the account and completely invalidate the account, and it's not on your credit report anymore. You've introduced the human element. Perhaps a worker over at the credit bureau has received 500 dispute letters. The person is tired, he wants to go away on his vacation on a Thursday or Friday, whatever the case may be, and just giving out approvals to disputes left and right. And they're just performing cursory investigations, and they're not investigating things like they're supposed to, and they give out, you get a better chance, bottom line, to go ahead and send out a physical letter. Now, when you send it, when you mail it, you want to use certified mail with a delivery and signature confirmation, so you've got proof that the credit bureaus actually received that document. Now, a number of companies, they'll charge you for sending out these letters, for writing these letters and sending them out on your behalf. Now you can go ahead and pay. I mean, I pay all the time to perform services, so I don't have to do it, so I don't have to spend time doing it. I mean, time is my most valuable asset. I prefer to use that time to work on my business and build that. Nonetheless, if you got more time than money, you can go ahead and do that yourself. Now, you can go ahead and visit the spreadsheet where I list links to information resources and application portals to grants for everyone, the credit tab. And look, I've got templates right here that the FTC, the United States federal government, actually puts out itself for consumers like you and I to go ahead and send these disputes by mail on ftc.gov. Official right here. Sample letter disputing errors on credit reports to the business that supplied the information. Right here. This is to the business. It's actually the second step. We haven't even gotten to this, but they've got this. Look, this is more like a debt validation letter, which we'll get to shortly. Look, credit report dispute right here. Look, they give you samples. They give you the contact information for each of those organizations. You can go ahead and visit their websites. They got links to it right here, and you can get the addresses to where you're going to send these dispute letters right here. And look, and they've got samples of what you can write right here. The important thing to keep in mind, you have to include your name, your date of birth, perhaps the last 4 digits of your social security number, so they can identify you, the account number that the derogatory item references, and go ahead and investigate it yourself. Ensure that everything is accurate, because if one thing is inaccurate on it, if for instance you owe $1,010 and the derogatory item lists that you owe $1,011, go ahead and dispute it. It's inaccurate. That could completely wipe out that derogatory item from your Experian, from your TransUnion, from your Equifax credit report. Another thing with late payments, if for instance you find that an organization reported a late payment on one bureau as 30 days late, then 60 days on another, then 30 on another, that's an inconsistency that you can go ahead and report. If they're using an old address, once you update your address and you state that I'm not associated with that old address at all, that can completely wipe out all of the derogatory items that are associated with that old address or that address in which you don't live anymore, right? So you have to ensure that everything is accurate pertaining to who you are as a person, all your identifying information right now at this very moment. It has to be accurate. Go ahead and respectfully request that they investigate. Now, if they reject your dispute, you go ahead and send a follow-up letter requesting that the credit bureau communicate what was the method that they used to go ahead and investigate that account. And you can go ahead and reach out to the creditor themselves. It could be a collection agency. And I mean, one route to go, the way that I've actually handled this a number of times, and it's a way that you don't have to do. I potentially lost money because through a dispute process, I could have probably saved money on this, but I go directly to, let's say, collection agencies or to the creditor themselves. With a collection agency, these are organizations that they buy the debt off of a creditor at a fraction of the debt. So pennies on the dollar. So for instance, let's say you owed Time Warner Cable. That actually happened to me. $500. I only actually owed Time Warner Cable, I think, with like 200 and change. And they put it on my credit report, right? If the collection agency didn't have it in my particular case, but if a collection agency did have it, they potentially bought that debt for $50. So I could tell them, listen, I give you $100 or $75 and we settle it. Nonetheless, you have to ensure, first off, watch how you're speaking to these people over the phone, because it's a recorded line and they could validate that you agreed to having that debt or paying that debt based off the words that you say. You say, listen, if I owe this debt, how much did I owe? If I decide to pay $100 for this $500 debt, I need you to agree that you will remove this off of my credit report. They have to agree to that in writing in one way, form, or the other. There's other techniques that you could perform. You could actually have them agree to that when they endorse the check that you're sending out to them. You could, the key thing, this is what I've done, is to ensure that they first tell you in writing how much you owe and how much you can pay, and that upon payment of whatever you settle that account, first off, they've listed on the account that it is paid as agreed. That means it is not settled, because even if it's settled, that may impact your credit score negatively. It has to read it paid as agreed. In other words, you paid the entire amount that was owed on that account, and that they remove any derogatory item, any late payments, anything associated negatively on that particular account. Another thing is that you have to send dispute letters to all 3 credit bureaus. One to Equifax, one to Experian, one to TransUnion. You just can't send one out and expect the other bureaus to go ahead and remove the derogatory item from your credit report. When you file a dispute, the credit bureau by law has to respond to you within 30 days time. Otherwise, they may have to remove that derogatory item from your credit. Another thing to do if the credit bureaus reject your dispute is to go ahead and reach out to the creditor themselves. In other words, a collection agency or the creditor itself, and request that they validate the debt. Once you make that request, they have to provide proof that that debt is valid within 30 days time. If they don't do that, you could actually sue that organization for $1,000. You want to ask a collection agency for the contract that validates that debt with the creditor from which they bought that debt. You may also want to explore a credit boost. Experian, for instance, has a credit boost program where you can have organizations that typically do not report to your credit report once you make on-time payments. So for instance, when you pay your rent, you could include those payments to boost your credit score. When you pay your light bill and other bills that typically don't report to your credit. I heard that a number of people, when they were trying to get their credit scores above 570 to qualify for the economic injury disaster loan, they actually did Experian boosts, and it got their credit scores above the threshold to allow them to be approved for that funding. Now, if you go back to our spreadsheet, we've got guides coming from the major credit bureaus that explain to you exactly how to do that stuff. So look, so you got TransUnion right here, TransUnion, Experian, dispute by mail, Equifax, dispute by mail. You got all the information right here if you don't want to pay for it. You got more time than money. And these are the laws that these creditors have to abide by when they're charging you, when they're billing you, when they're performing these collections. You got to get to know this stuff. The Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the FCRA, all of these laws right here. Look, the best credit utilization ratio, everything that we've discussed in this video. What is a good credit score? Like I told you, the sweet spot is 740, right? Advice on restrictive check endorsements to settle debt. Restrictive check endorsements, that's something where on your, you know what, when someone goes and cashes a check, they have to endorse the check. So beneath it, some people recommend that you actually include that upon payment, it is paid as agreed, and that they'll remove any derogatory items from the credit. Now, the other thing you want to keep in mind is that you have to know what are the statute of limitations in your state to collect a debt. In other words, some states only have a couple of years to go ahead and collect a debt. And I've gone ahead and listed some of the laws pertaining to statute of limitations on the spreadsheet. But I went ahead and performed a couple of queries just to see what the statute of limitations are in my home state, in New York, right? According to this, in other words, statute of limitations, what it does, it basically sets a date for when an organization is able to sue you for any funds that you owe. So you want to know that, because sometimes you could just wait it out and you could just wait for the statute of limitations to be up, so you know that, listen, this organization can't sue me because the statute of limitations are up. The debt is too old. Look, the statute of limitations in New York is 6 years for any type of debt. The 6-year time period is counted from when a debt repayment became due or when the debtor made the most recent payment, whichever is more recent. What you got to watch out for is that there are ways you have to find out in your state for them to reset the statute of limitations. So if you admit to owing the debt, if you make any type of communication, if you make a payment on the debt, you may reset the statute of limitations. Although it was 6 years ago, then let's say you make a payment on it 3 years ago. From 3 years ago, they have another 6 years to go ahead and potentially sue you. So you take a look at a couple of other states. North Carolina statute of limitations, they got a short statute of limitations, only 3 years in North Carolina that debtors have to go ahead and potentially sue you unless it's a judgment. In Connecticut, I think it's also like 4 or 5 years or whatever the case may be. You've got to look out for your state. Again, none of this is financial or legal advice. Watch the video you see on the screen right now so you can learn how to file your LLC to qualify for business credit and more forms of capital.